Europe has been hit since pretty much beginning of this year. So we are lagging behind a little bit on that development versus the US. Now, if you're looking at what the consumers currently say and how they feel about it, looking at the survey again, let's start with the UK, 60% of those consumers surveyed feel that restaurant prices are higher compared to last year. Now, in the UK, we need to keep in mind that we had the VAT rate change. So the VAT rolled back to 20% in April after it was lowered to first 5% and then 12.5% during COVID. So there's a bit of an impact there as well. Now, when we looked at justifiable reasons for price increases, so we asked those questions in conjunction, the positive side for the industry is that 72% of consumers believe that increased food costs are justifiable reasons for restaurants to increase prices.
But as you were saying earlier, if they have a choice between going down to the local restaurant and keeping the heat on.
So that's exactly the critical question that the continent or the Europe is now facing. We've seen a similar, Francois, correct me, but if I'm looking at the numbers, I think we've seen a similar trend in the US where consumers were actually walking along with price increases quite nicely, pretty much until the end of last year for about half a year, let's say. And then we've started to see a decrease in traffic and transactions. And so those price increases absolutely don't flow through as much as they have in the past. So to your point, Tracy, the real test of consumer resilience of pricing will come in Q3 and Q4 of this year in Europe. Let's not forget that we are lagging behind the US and we've just started that. We also had the first summer of unrestricted travel again in Europe. So a lot of consumers did actually make use of this for vacation. So for all non-Europeans, the Europeans love their beach vacations in summer, right? So you go away and incidentally, spending behavior changes, right? You become less price sensitive, this sort of thing, right? And then to the point, now we are coming back from vacation, heating gets on, energy costs are through the roof. So the real stress test in terms of consumer resilience will be seen in Q3 and Q4 of this year.
Yeah. I contributed to the European travel dollar. So you're welcome. Masato, you mentioned, are we being more cautious? I mean, do you feel like, as Philipp said, maybe Japan is following in the footsteps, like Europe might be of the US, or do you feel like you're really kind of operating in a different state?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting, actually. If you look at the survey result, 6 to 68% of consumers reported higher restaurant prices in the US and Europe, while in Tokyo and France, that number was lower, 46% and 48% respectively, if I remember correctly. For Japan specifically, the difference I see is actually on in the behaviors of restaurants and retailers, that they tend to reduce the size or portion to keep the price the same instead of increasing the price. So actually, again, this is kind of related to what I explained before, that the companies restaurants or retailers are kind of afraid of losing. They don't want to give a message to consumers that they took price, they increased price. So instead of, they tend to reduce the size or portion and keep the price the same. So that's kind of like the behaviors that we are seeing in Japan, and that is very quite different than the retailers, restaurants in the US, for instance.
Francois mentioned shrinkflation early on. Masato, do your consumers, do consumers in Japan have that kind of negative reaction to shrinkflation, or are you seeing that at all?
I think that's a very negative, that people normally, I think people have not been noticing that so far, but I think this that we're under very unprecedented inflationary period, people are just very cautious about the size, portion, what they're getting, and what they're paying for.